At a strict Christian camp, two girls bond through secret notes, hoping to not get caught. Will they stay silent or risk everything to tell the truth? The first thing they make you do when you arrive at Camp Edenlight is give up your phone. There's no ceremony to it, no speech about disconnecting from the world to reconnect with God. Just a plastic bin with masking tape on top, marked in technology. Surrender for sanctity. A tall woman in a gray t-shirt and a cross necklace smiled at me like she was doing me a favor. I dropped my phone into the bin and felt the cold grip of isolation tighten around my ribs. Welcome to summer. I'm Mara Delaney, 15, closeted and excellent at pretending. You have to be when you grow up in a town where your mother leads worship, and your father thinks the gays are a sign of the end times. I've gotten good at hiding in plain sight, smiling at the right verses, bowing my head at the right prayers, and keeping the ache in my chest neatly folded like a note I'll never send. Camp Edenlight was supposed to make me better. At least that's what my parents said when they sent me. It's tucked deep in the pines, an hour outside town. Rustic cabins, chipped paint, and a bell that rings every morning at 7 sharp. There's a chapel with hard benches, a mess hall that smells like burnt toast, and counselors who use phrases like moral recalibration with perfectly straight faces. My assigned cabin, Cabin 6, was already buzzing when I got there. Girls unpacking, squealing, laughing. Most of them were loud church girls, the kind who make Bible verses into Instagram captions and have purity ring tan lines. I found the bottom bunk in the corner and quietly stashed my duffel beneath it. Hi. I'm Kayla, one girl chirped, plopping down across from me on her bed. Blonde, bubbly, braces. Mara, I said. She tilted her head. Like Mara in the Bible? Sure, I said, except she was bitter, and I'm just tired. She laughed like she thought I was joking. That first day was a blur of forced cheer, name games, worship songs, rules. Always the rules. No phones, no unsupervised contact with boys, no physical affection of any kind. All letters home must be read and approved before mailing. Even hugs was strongly discouraged unless initiated by staff. We want you to practice holy boundaries, Counselor Dev explained. Hands folded like a prayer emoji come to life. Temptation is real. Discipline is divine. Every word she said made me feel smaller. That night, during orientation chapel, I noticed her. She was sitting on the end of the third pew, alone, older than me, 16, maybe 17, dark curls pulled back in a messy bun, collar buttoned all the way to the throat. While the other girls clapped and swayed to a terrible acoustic rendition of Oceans, she just watched. Not in the angry way, but like she was far away in her mind, like she'd already seen this performance 100 times. Later, I heard one of the girls whisper her name, Jo Ramirez. I saw her again at Bible study 2 mornings later. We were in the chapel, knees stiff from the wooden floors, Bibles open to Corinthians. Our counselor was droning on about love, God's love, unconditional love, but only if you obey. My eyes glazed over somewhere around verse 10. When I flipped to the next page, something fell out. A scrap of paper, ripped along the edges as if torn from a notebook in haste. No name, just a single line written in looping, slanted ink. Do you ever feel like you're acting in someone else's play? My heartbeat stuttered. I glanced around. No one seemed to notice. Jo was 2 rows ahead, her head bowed, her hands clasped neatly over her Bible. She didn't look back. That night I couldn't sleep. My bunk creaked every time I turned. Kayla whispered prayers from the bed above me, like she was talking in her sleep. I clutched the note in my palm until it crumpled soft, my thumb tracing the ink. Was it for me? Was it random? Was it a test? By morning, I'd nearly convinced myself it wasn't real, that I'd imagined the whole thing, until the next Bible study. This time, the note was folded into a triangle and tucked between Romans, and then when today they said, obedience is freedom. What do you think? Name again, just careful penmanship, sharp-pointed letters. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how, but I started watching her more closely. Jo didn't sit with anyone at meals. She drew in the margins of her workbook during devotionals. Her eyes flicked toward me sometimes, just briefly, like a match being struck, but she never smiled. A few days later, I slipped a reply beneath the lid of a communal donation jar near the chapel door, tucked under a fake prayer request card. I wrote, "Freedom shouldn't feel like drowning," and that was how it started, our secret correspondence. We passed notes like prisoners, in hymnals, under paper plates, behind mirror frames. She drew me silly comics, stick figures climbing out of Bibles, whispering curses. I sent her quotes from books I wasn't allowed to bring. She made up games where we'd rewrite verses, to be honest, instead of holy. Sometimes I'd find a flower pressed in a folded napkin or a page torn from a novel I'd never read. Each message was a breath, a heartbeat, a piece of something I hadn't realized I was starving for. I started walking slower between cabins, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. I started praying less. But the camp was always watching, and Jo never let her face show anything. Even when I left a note saying, I wish we could talk out loud, she only replied, and they listen harder when you're quiet. The next Sunday during the testimony fire pit, someone read a confession about impure thoughts. Vague, shaky voice. They didn't name names, but everyone turned their heads. The counselors reminded us that secrets rot the soul, that honesty, even painful honesty, was the only path to salvation. That night, a new sign went up in the dining hall. God sees what man cannot. Joe didn't come to breakfast the next morning. I panicked quietly. No one else seemed to notice she was gone, not even Counselor Deb. But after chapel, when I sat in my usual pew, I found another note beneath my seat. It was shorter than usual, just 2 lines. They took my last one. I'm being careful. I read it. I read it 3 times, the pit in my stomach growing colder with each pass. They took her note. That meant someone found it. That meant someone knew. That meant we were being watched. And that was when I realized what we were doing, what we had, wasn't just forbidden, it was dangerous. For the next few days, Joe and I said nothing. At least, not in the usual way. No notes in Bibles, no flowers, no drawings, no silly code scratched in the dirt with a stick. It was like we'd both gone quiet on purpose, holding our breath in the same underwater space. But silence isn't the same as absence. And Joe was still there, at meals, at chapel, walking slowly behind the group on hikes. She never looked at me directly, not for more than a second. But once, when we passed on the way to separate activities, her fingers brushed against mine for the briefest moment. It was the first time we'd ever touched. My skin tingled for hours afterward. Then came the Wednesday storm. Every summer at Eden Light, there's a week when the rain won't stop. Thick, slanted sheets that make the cabin smell like mildew and wet socks. We were trapped inside for most of the day, counselors herding us into the chapel for extra prayer sessions and spiritual reflections. By then, everyone was stir-crazy and snapping at each other, even Kayla. That night, when the storm turned into a full-blown power outage, I took a risk. While the other girls were gossiping by flashlight or braiding each other's hair, I slipped a note into Joe's raincoat. I had to fake a cough just to cover the sound of the zipper. My heart pounded the whole time. I wrote, "I miss your handwriting. Are you okay?" I didn't sleep. I just lay there listening to the storm, counting the seconds between thunder and lightning, counting the spaces between myself and her. The next morning, I found a reply folded beneath the corner of my bowl. Not okay, but I still remember what your laugh sounds like. That's when I started to cry. Quiet. The kind of crying you do with your mouth shut and your body still. We were slipping, both of us. And someone, somewhere, knew. On Friday, it happened. I was in the laundry shed, slipping another note into the inside flap of Joe's folded towel. We'd moved to only passing 1 or 2 words now, just fragments like, "Still here, you're brave." But I didn't hear Counselor Deb come in. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there in the doorway, watching me like she'd caught me pocketing communion wine. Her voice was soft, too soft, like she was trying not to scare a wild animal. I froze, my fingers still clutching the edge of the towel. "Nothing," I said. She walked forward slowly, reached for the towel, peeled it open, pulled out the note. She didn't even look at it. She just slipped it into her skirt pocket. "I think it's time we had a talk," she said. They didn't let me see Joe after that. They moved me to Cabin 1, the prayer recovery dorm. It smelled like peppermint oil and shame. The girls here were quiet, watched, drained. I saw one of them sobbing into her hands after lights out, rocking back and forth in her bunk like she was praying to disappear. Every day, I was brought into a room with a worn couch and a laminated sign that said, "Healing is a process." The counselors asked gentle, firm questions. "Do you feel you've been led astray? Would you like to write a letter of apology to God? Is there anything else, anything at all you'd like to confess?" They said I could still graduate to youth leadership, that this didn't have to define me, that forgiveness was possible if I was willing to repent. But first, they needed names. They needed confirmation. They needed me to say Joe's name. I didn't. Not the first day, not the second. But the pressure grew like moss. Thick, wet, clinging. On the 4th day, a new counselor came in. Not Deb, a man I didn't recognize. Tall, bald. Bible clutched like a weapon. He didn't sit, he just said, "Joe Ramirez is being sent home tomorrow. Her parents have been notified." My stomach dropped. "She's been spiritually compromised," he added. "But she's young. Like you. There's still hope for you, Mara. If you want to help her, not hurt her, you'll tell the truth. Otherwise, this won't end well for either of you." I don't remember walking back to my cabin. I don't remember crying. But I must have, because my pillow was wet that night. I thought about Joe, about the way she held her pen like a violin bow, about how she once drew a picture of a house in the clouds and labeled it someday. About the fact that no one had ever looked at me the way she did, and maybe never would again. By morning, I'd made up my mind. The chapel was nearly empty. They were expecting a confession, a private one, maybe a written apology, something they could tuck in a file and show my parents with a smile and the word progress. Instead, I walked to the front and stepped onto the little platform where they usually led prayer songs. My legs shook. I opened my mouth, and for the first time that summer, I didn't speak in code. "I'm not confused," I said. "I'm not sick. I'm not broken." The room was dead silent. "I'm in love," I said, my voice cracking, "and I won't name her because you already know, and because she never asked to be saved." "Not by you." A gasp came from the pews. One of the girls started crying. I kept going. "You taught us that God is love. But you also taught us to fear that love if it doesn't fit your rules. I won't be afraid anymore." The door opened behind me. Counselor Deb. 2 more staff members. They didn't drag me off stage. They didn't scream. They just stood there like statues, silent and righteous. I stepped down and walked past them. No one stopped me. They sent me home early. My parents didn't speak to me for most of the drive. My mom kept wiping her eyes. My dad muttered something about the devil. I sat in the back seat and stared out the window, wondering if Joe had already left, If she was staring at her own road, her own storm, her own silence, I thought I'd feel ashamed. Instead, I felt hollow and free. School started a few weeks later. I kept to myself. Didn't go back to youth group, stopped pretending to laugh at locker room jokes. I wasn't out, exactly, but I wasn't folding myself in half to survive anymore. And then, one crisp September afternoon, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a used paperback of Jane Eyre. Dog-eared, underlined, tucked between the pages, a folded note. In Joe's handwriting. Still acting or writing your own part? I pressed the book to my chest. The wind blew through the window, brushing my cheek like a whisper. And for the first time since Camp Edenlight, I smiled. The end. Comment what stories you want to hear next. Subscribe to FryyDaee on YouTube for the full videos. Thanks for watching.